everybody, welcome to the Monday edition of Crafting and Crime Daily. How was your weekend? Mine was pretty good. On Friday I was on DP Addiction Adventures live. That was a lot of fun. She's one of my besties. I have lots of besties, but she's one of them. The rest of them, you guys know who you are. Anyway, so today, usually I cover live trials, but since it's Monday, we're going to do a true crime story. Usually I do a Murdock Monday, and I'm going to tie this into the Murdock. Don't you worry, I'm going to tie it into Murdock. I can type anything. It's like what is it called? 6 degrees or 8 degrees of Kevin Bacon or something. This is going to be the 8 degree or 6 degrees of Alec Murdock. Okay, so this is the story of Polly Klaas. She is a 12-year-old girl that was kidnapped in 1993. Oh my gosh. Yeah, this has been covered all over the media. You're probably like, oh, I remember this. But there's some some legislation that came about after her kidnapping that I want to tell you about and how that panned out. So let's talk about Polly Klaas. So Polly Klaas, she was having a slumber party. This was on October 1st of 1993 in a small town in Northern California called Petaluma. Now, she lived with her mother and her stepsister, and she was waiting for her friends, Kate and Jillian. So once Kate and Jillian get there around 8:30, the slumber party is on. Do you remember having slumber parties? Oh my gosh. You have all your girlfriends over and you got lots of food, chips and ice cream and soda pop, just enough to keep you up all night, right? Just to annoy the heck out of your parents. Now, as a parent, I hated these things. Oh my God, I hated these things. Because you knew you were not going to get any sleep that night. No, you had to be up with those kids because, you just have to. So she and her friend, Kate and Jillian, are trying on Halloween costumes because, this is October 1st. Halloween's right around the corner. They're trying on Halloween costumes and they're getting kind of loud. So about 9:45, Mom, Abe Nichols, she goes up to the room. Now, Mom's room is right across the hall. And she tells the girls, girls, can you kind of keep it down? You're getting a little loud. And they're like, oh, sorry, Mom. So Eve, she's got a migraine. So she goes to her room and she takes something for her migraine and she falls fast asleep. So the girls continue their party. About an hour later, about 10:30 or so, they decide, we're going to get into our sleeping bags. This is where you start talking about the boys and, having a good time. So, and it's getting late, so you're getting silly and everybody's giggling and laughing and you're having a good time. So Polly opens her bedroom door to go get the sleeping bags. And when she does, there is a man standing in the doorway. Now, this man, he's got a knife. That's probably all I would have seen is the knife. But Kate and Jillian get a pretty good look at this guy. So middle-aged guy, scruffy facial hair, so he comes into the room. He makes all of the girls lie down, face down on the floor next to each other. And then he starts tying them up. First, he wants to know whose house is this? And Polly's like, it's my house. And he's like, well, I'm not going to harm any of you guys. I'm just here for money. And she's like, you can have all my allowance. And he ignores them. And oh, Stitch, what are you doing? Oh, he's in the shoebox again. A silly cat. I keep picking the box up because he gets it tilted on the side and then he gets inside of it. And I keep putting it upright again and then he knocks it over. I'm just going to leave it over because it seems to be a favorite hiding place. let me get some footage for you here. Where are you going? Where are you going? Now you can't get down. Yeah. You silly cat. Crazy cat. Okay. Where was I? Okay, so he after they offer him the money, the allowance and stuff, he gags them so they can't talk. Then he takes Polly and he leaves. He does tell the girls, Kate and Jillian, I want you girls to count to 1,000. So the girls, they, as soon as he leaves, they're not counting to 1,000. They're trying to get out of these bindings, and they do. It takes them about 20 minutes, but they get out of the bindings. Then they go and across the hall, and they wake up Polly's mom, Eve. So Eve starts looking all over her house. Where's Polly? Can't find Polly, so she calls 911. The police get there and they look in this bedroom and they're like, oh my gosh, there is a lot of evidence here. All the ties that they were bound with, the stuff that they were gagged with. The guy used an Xbox cord. So there was all kinds of evidence. So they call in the FBI. They're like, the girl's been kidnapped. This is a stranger abduction. So they call in the FBI. There is immediately an all points bulletin put out for the different police agencies, including the California Highway Patrol. But it's put out only on Channel 1. Now, not all police agencies are on Channel 1. So not everybody heard this all points bulletin. But the search that starts the next day is massive. All of the neighbors, friends, family, people that were interested. Winona Ryder, the actress who also grew up in Petaluma, California. This is where it was, in Northern California, Petaluma. Did I say that already? I might have. I don't know. So Winona Ryder, who was from this area, she offered a $200,000 reward for information leading to, the finding of Polly. Now, the old saying used to be that, the first 48 hours are the most critical in a crime. But with a child and a kidnapping, it's more like the first 4 hours because, after that, the kidnapper's going to start panicking, especially if this is not a ransom kidnapping, and they're going to want to get rid of the child. So, meanwhile, that same night, this woman, she's a babysitter. She's leaving her employer's property. Now it just so happens to be the timing is about 20 minutes after the kidnapping has taken place. And as it's about 20 miles north of Petaluma, California, in a rural area called Santa Rosa. And she is driving away from her employee's house over this long driveway, and she sees on the private property there's a car there and it's stuck in a ditch, and this man flags her down and she rolls down her window and he's like, can you get out, can you help me get this car? And she's like, I don't think I'm the right person for this. She was getting these really weird vibes from this guy. He's sweating, he's nervous, he's got like leaves and stuff in his hair, and she's like, no. So she keeps going. So she leaves. She gets to where she can make a phone call. Because, this was... Did we have cell phones in 93? I'm trying to think. When did we get cell phones? I don't think it was 93. It wasn't in 93 yet. No. It's later than that. Anyway. No cell phones. So she gets to where she can make a phone call. She calls her employer and she says, listen, there's somebody on your property and he's really creepy. His car is stuck in the ditch. So the employer, she decides she leaves her kids because, this is the middle of the night. Now we're talking like 11 o'clock at night. Well, maybe not the middle of the night for me, but the middle of the night for kids. So she leaves her kids. She drives down the driveway. She just passes the car. She sees the car. She doesn't see the driver anywhere. She doesn't see him at all. So she keeps going, and she stops at the nearest service station, and she calls 911. So these officers from Sonoma, or from, was it from Sonoma? I don't know where the officers are from. Anyway, the officers come. They had not heard the All Points Bulletin because they were on Channel 3, these officers. So they talk to the guy. He says, I'm stuck in this ditch. And so they run his driver's license and they run his license plate. And they both come back with no wants, no warrants. Even though there was a warrant out for this guy's arrest for an outstanding DUI or something. I don't remember. But it doesn't come back. So they have no reason to arrest this guy. They call a tow truck to get the guy out of the ditch. The guy tells them he was just in the area sightseeing. Now, it's midnight. What are you sightseeing at 11 o'clock or midnight? Or whenever it was that you got your little vehicle stuck. So that's very strange. So that while the officers are waiting for the tow truck, they search his vehicle just to make sure there's nobody else inside, that there's no evidence that anybody else was in this vehicle, except they find an open can of beer. Now, they can't arrest him for the open can of beer because he wasn't driving the vehicle. They didn't see him driving the vehicle, and it's not illegal to have an open can of beer. So they do make him pour it out before they send him on his way. The other thing that they could have done was the owner could have had him arrested. She could have made a citizen's arrest for trespassing. But in order to do that, she would have had to come down to where they were off this long driveway from her house, and she would have had to say, I arrest you. And she didn't want to do that. So they get him out of the ditch, the tow truck, and they send him on his way. But they've got it all written down in their report, his name and everything. Now he's in the system. Or, it's been reported that they've had this encounter with him that night. That man was Richard Allen Davis. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about Richard Allen Davis. So Richard Allen Davis, he was born in 1954. He would be 68 years old now. Well, he is 68 years old. He's still alive. So he was born in San Francisco in 1954. He was born to both parents who were alcoholics, and both physically abused him. Mother, as a form of discipline, would burn the children's fingers on the stove. I mean, how horrible is that? So his parents divorced when he was 11 years old, and they were given a choice of who they wanted to live with, him and his siblings. So he and his sisters chose to go live with Dad, who was a longshoreman and didn't have time to take care of these kids. So they were just shuffled around from relative to relative, girlfriend to girlfriend, over until they grew up. At 12 years old, Richard Allen Davis had been placed on probation for burglary and forgery. Forgery at 12 years old. What? Okay. Then again at 15 years old, he gets put on probation for burglary again. Then when he's 17, by now at 17, he has dropped out of high school. He stole a motorcycle, and the judge, when he was, he was arrested for it. When he goes in front of the judge, he says, I'm going to give you a choice. You can either go to a youth detention center, or you can join the Army. Which is it, honey? And he says, okay, I'll join the Army. So he joins the Army. Now, I don't have any information of what kind of serviceman he was, but he was given a general discharge, not dishonorable, just a general discharge after he served 13 months. Then he went on at 18 to go to this party at the home of a woman named Marlene Voris. That night, Marlene was found murdered or dead. She had 7 suicide notes near her body. So the police ruled that this was a suicide. But lots and lots of people that knew this woman and knew him, Richard Davis, thought that it was he who had murdered her. But he was never charged with that. It was ruled a suicide. Then a few weeks after the death of Miss Voris, he is arrested for pawning stolen property. So when he's arrested for pawning the stolen property, he confesses to a bunch of burglaries. So he's sentenced to 6 months in jail. Had to straighten that drill out. Okay. So at 19 years old, just 5 weeks after his release from the 6-month prison sentence, he is arrested again for burglary. So now he's kind of like a professional burglar. He's arrested for burglary again, and he's sentenced to 6 months to 15 years in prison. So he only serves 1 year in prison and then is released. Back out into the world. Yeah. So a clear, extensive history, criminal history. So I want to add that the night that he was stopped on the side of the road on this woman's property, and the police ran his driver's license and his license plate. At this point in time, they did not have the luxury of getting his criminal record. All they could get would be if there was any warrants out for his arrest, and that's, driver's license information. They could, whether you have valid driver's license, they couldn't get any criminal record on him. So they had no reason to suspect anything. Meanwhile, this woman, her property, she had in November, late November, she had some loggers come and clear some of her property. So she's out inspecting the property, and she finds some stuff that she thinks is very suspicious, including torn pair of ballet tights. So on November 28th, she calls the police, and they come out, and they find stuff they believe to be associated with Polly Klaas's kidnapping. So they begin this massive manhunt in this area. Over 500 search teams and involving 24 agencies. They search and they search. They continue this search until December 3rd. Meanwhile, once they find this stuff on the property, they run to see if there's been any activity near this property, police activity near this property. And then that's when they find that back on October 1st, this Richard Allen Davis had his car stuck in this woman's driveway. So they have his name, and they also have this palm print because they suspect this could be related to Polly Klaas's kidnapping, these ballet tights, because this was only part of the ballet tights. The other part of the ballet tights had been in her bedroom. So remember I said they had a palm print? They take that palm print and they run it, and it matches Richard Allen Davis. So they go out and they arrest Richard Allen Davis. So he doesn't know that they have a palm print on him. They actually don't arrest him for the kidnapping of Polly Klaas. They arrest him for a warrant that he had outstanding for DUI. So they arrest him for that. They just want to get him behind bars. Then he has a friend come visit him. And his friend says, hey, because it was all over the media that this palm print matched Richard Allen Davis. He just didn't know it. So somebody says to him, I don't know if it was his friend or not, but somebody says to them, hey, they've got your palm print. So Richard, who I've just told you is no stranger to the criminal justice system, knows that if you speak up early, you could maybe cut a deal. So he decides he's ready to talk. Now, he had been visited, after they arrest him for the DUI and the suspected involvement in Polly Klaas's kidnapping. A detective goes and they talk to him, and he doesn't want to talk. But the detective leaves his name and phone number. So it is until December 3rd that he calls And he calls the detective and says, I'm ready to talk. So they go down and they talk to him on the 4th, where he confesses to the murder of Polly Klaas. Yes, Polly Klaas was with him that night that he was stranded in the ditch on that woman's property. However, he took her up into the woods. She was bound and gagged, and he left her there, came back down, dealt with the police officers. Once the police officers had made sure he was in his vehicle, the vehicle was out of the ditch, and escorted him back to a road that wasn't on private property, he waited a sufficient amount of time, and then he came back, got Polly, took her somewhere else, strangled her, and buried her body. So on December 5th, he actually led them to the body. The body, as it turns out, was buried about 20 miles from where the search had been taking place. So Richard Allen Davis goes on trial for the murder. He pled not guilty because they didn't offer him a deal. He thought they would. They didn't. He goes on trial for the murder of Polly Klaas on June 18th of 1996. He is found guilty by a jury of first-degree murder. Then they have like a separate little trial where they decide if it's life in prison without possibility of parole or death. They come back with a recommendation of the death penalty. When he hears this sentence of death, the death penalty, instead of offering like remorse or anything like that, he smiles, turns to the camera, and puts both of his middle fingers up, shoots a bird, smiles at the camera. And then he turns around to the judge and says, well, the last thing Polly said before she died was, don't do me like my dad did. Well, her dad, Mark Klaas, gets up and tries to attack him in the courtroom. So, of course, he's restrained. And the judge says, usually he says, for a judge, this is something that's very, very difficult to sentence somebody to a sentence of death. But for you, you've made it very easy, and I'm sentencing you to death. How horrible. But anyway, after this, there was a lot of focus on how all of these habitual criminals they'd go in, they'd be released after short periods of their sentences, and they would be back on the streets, and they would just commit the crimes over and over and over again, including Richard Allen Davis. If he had, all told, in his lifetime, he had been sentenced to over 200 years in prison. He only served like 1 year here and 6 months there. So, yeah, a year and a half of all the burglaries and forgeries and all this, stealing cars and motorcycles that he had. He should have been behind bars. He shouldn't have been out, kidnapping children. So the legislature in California decided we're going to enact a 3 strikes rule, which says, a 3 strikes law, which says that if you're on your 3rd felony conviction, you get life automatically in prison. Life in prison. So currently, there are about half of the states in this country that have this 3 strikes rule. They did have to modify it because in its purest form, there were people going to jail for stuff that just should not, on their 3rd strike. One guy went to jail for stealing a slice of pizza. I mean, there was stuff that's clearly nonviolent that they probably should not have been sentenced to life for. So California actually modified their 3 strikes rule to say that only violent criminals, murders, kidnappings, things like that, would apply to the 3 strikes rule. Now, I'm going to tie this into the Murdock case. Okay. Alex Murdock recently had more charges added to his laundry list of charges. He is now facing 101 charges for financial crimes. The most recent ones were income tax related. So he's already been convicted of the murder of Maggie. He's been convicted of the murder of Paul. If he gets any convictions on any of this financial stuff, that's his third strike. South Carolina has a third strike law, and he will go to life in prison without the possibility of parole. I mean, that's what he's sentenced to already, but this will just kind of seal the deal. Yeah. See, I told you I could tie it to the Murdock case. I personally think the 3 strikes is a good thing. I do. But not all states have it. So if you're a criminal out there and you're going to get ready to do your third crime, check and see what your state has for crimes. Let me get the crime calendar out. Today is Monday, May 1st. It is May 1st. Yes. Okay. We're going to talk about Alice Sebold. This is a survivor story. Best-selling author Alice Sebold was a freshman at Syracuse University in New York when she was brutally beaten and raped while walking home through a tunnel near campus early in the morning of May 8th, 1981. The police told her a woman had been murdered and dismembered in the same spot and that she was lucky in comparison. Police failed to find any leads in the case, but Sebold said she spotted her rapist on the sidewalk one day, which led to a man being apprehended. She testified in court and was called the best rape witness ever seen on the stand for her presence of mind in court. The man she identified was convicted of rape and sodomy and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Sebold went on to write 3 books, including the best-selling novel, The Lovely Bones, and a memoir, Lucky, which discuss her rape and the subsequent trial in detail. This doesn't make any sense. Wait a minute. Oh, okay, I see. Best-selling author Alice Sebold was a freshman at Syracuse when she was brutally beaten and raped while walking home through a tunnel near campus early in the morning of May 8, 1981. The police told her a woman had been murdered and dismembered in the same spot. Oh, she was lucky in comparison because she didn't get murdered. I get it now. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry, I'm slow. Wow, I've heard of The Lovely Bones. I have not heard of Lucky. I'm not familiar with her work, but I'd like to look that up. Okay, so in the UK, this is a bank holiday, and in Australia, this is Labor Day. Robin, how do you celebrate Labor Day in Australia? Let me know. All right, guys, have a great Monday. I will see you tomorrow on Crafting a Crime Daily. Well, we will continue our coverage of the Lori Vallow Daybell trial. Everybody, have a great day. Bye.